Welcome, everyone, to the next episode of Something to Talk About. Today's episode is going to talk about finances, finances in a relationship, and when it's appropriate to bring the topic up, how to engage, and the pitfalls if you don't deal with it. My guest today is an old friend of mine, and I don't mean old because he's aged. I mean because we've been friends for a long time. His name is Leroy Latimer II, and he has about 25 years of financial leadership background. He's currently working as the CFO at the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute. Prior to that, many years ago, I met him when he was the vice president of administration and controller at BET. Actually, a funny aside is that my whole reason for being at BET was because of Leroy. He heard about me. He mentioned it to the then CEO, Bob Johnson, and I sent in a resume, and the rest kind of was history. But if it hadn't been for him, much of what I know about business would never have happened. And so I don't want to say I owe my whole career to him, but boy, he was a linchpin in the part of my career that really kind of let me develop my chops around business. So without further ado, Leroy, how are
Well,
you?
I'm fine. Let me correct you. God used me to push you where you needed to be.
Oh, thank
I
you.
just tell you. Oh no, I say that. Say that sincerely. You are a business and the HR juggernaut, and BT was blessed and happy and lucky to have you. So you made that place what it needed to be. Not just black excellence, but excellence all the way around. And it's a pleasure to be your friend and a coworker of yours and a colleague. And great to see and talk to you again, Lynn.
Yes, it is. Listen, I want to be clear about the fact that we are not going to be talking finance tonight.
No.
And so, for those of you who are listening, we're not talking numbers. Actually, what we're going to be talking about is trust, transparency, and how to go about building a strong foundation for any really serious commitment relationship that you may be engaged in. So, let me start, Leroy, by asking you, why is it that it's so difficult for couples to talk about money?
I mean, I personally think it's something deeply personal. We all have our baggage, if you will, and a lot of it is deeply psychological. A lot of it comes by how we were brought up, what we were exposed to in our childhood. How did our parents talk about money? And in some instances it was very open, in some instances it was very closed. So very few people have a reference point. They didn't have the experience to know just how important that is. Be perfectly honest with you, we all have those little skeletons in our closet. Things that we did financially that we don't want anybody to know. We're embarrassed about it. It's something that some things should be talked about in the open. So you can clear certain things up. And then, quite honestly, some of us just don't want to admit our ignorance about certain things. We live in an information age out now. I mean, information, as my son tells me, use your smartphone for smart things. You can find out just about anything you want to do, right now. But when you're getting to know somebody in a relationship, I mean, part of it is like, money's going to eventually come up. How do they feel about it? What's expected? Do you respect money? It goes to, who they are as a person. And in a lot of cases, love is just not enough. It just isn't.
Well, it's interesting. I'm not suggesting that, you meet somebody and the next date you start telling them all about your financial background.
Sure.
But I think that if you're going to get involved, or if you're contemplating a serious commitment, moving in together, getting married, money is going to be something you've got to deal with. When I've polled people, just casually talking to folks, even when I'm talking about, when did you talk about money with your spouse? People, they instantly have a visceral reaction where they recoil when it comes to money. And I'm wondering, for couples who have not had that conversation, Is there a comfortable entry point that you think is a way to kind of raise the topic without anyone feeling overly paranoid?
Yeah, and that's a great question, Lynn, and it's a great question in regard to, I've been in finance my whole life. When I got married, I didn't have that conversation, you know. And I think the part of it is paying attention. Because see, some stuff you can see yourself. Look at the person's spending habits, or the person's shopping every week, whatever. Maybe they have it like that where they can shop every week and maybe they don't, whatever. But a lot of the people will actually tell you who they are, either through conversation or just looking at their actions. As I said, when somebody shows you who they are, believe them, you know. Absolutely believe them, But I think it's going to come up whether it's not, of course, you just start dating someone, you're not really going to get into that conversation. But as you get more and more serious, I think these things are going to come up, occasionally, and you can kind of look at their particular actions and kind of ease into the conversation. I know so many of us find out the hard way, and that's what, so the conversation starts off almost adversarial because something happens to spirit that, that communication. So when you say ease into it, it's either you start off very lightly, talking about, the way I try to introduce it is different things. This is how I feel about it, talking in a general sense, and you just have a conversation back and forth. But I think the converse to that is most people, something happens. Somebody has a bill that comes due and needs some help, and you're like, well, wait, I thought you made good money. Why do you need a loan from me? Or something to that effect. Then it starts off very adversarial, very accusal, in terms of person doesn't understand what the other person's viewpoint is, and then some cases it just all falls apart or it leads to more conversation in terms of just, how you both feel and view money. A lot of it also deals with just us as a people in general, we like to floss. It's very much built to our personal insecurities, if you will. I'm going to spend money and look good and have this appearance that I'm successful, so you look at the person and go, wow, is that really who I want to be with? Is that really who this person is? Or is that the representative that they're trying to appear to be?
Right.
So, I know I went around the question a little bit, but I think, it's something you really, truly have to talk about, and easing into that conversation, you can kind of maybe break the ice in just terms of their experience. Talk in general terms. How do they feel about credit? How do they feel about, savings? What's their long-term plans? If you ask somebody what's their personal business plan, it'll tell you a lot of how they feel about money. Because somebody that's mature enough and you ask them, okay, what's your plans for life, and how you're going to get there? They've got to expound and give you some details. If they're like, oh, I want to buy a house one day and I want a nice car. I'm going to have 3 kids. Okay. So, talk to me a little bit. How are we going to get there? How are we going to do this together? Because kids are expensive, cars are expensive. What's our plan? What's our life business plan? And I don't want to talk in financial terms as strict as that sounds, but your marriage or your relationship, 2 people coming together, it's a partnership and it's not going to be 50-50.
They never are.
Oh, no.
Even if that's the goal, it'll be 70-30 one time and 60-40 another time. Sometimes 90-10.
Yeah.
Particularly financially. One of the things that I know I've had recent conversations with guys about, these are guys who are married.
Sure.
And I said to them, when you first got married, when did you talk about how you were going to track your money? Are you going to have joint bank accounts? You're going to have separate accounts? Is everything going into a pool, or are individual people going to be responsible for certain financial obligations? You pay the mortgage, I'll pay the car note. You pay the utilities, I'll pay the phone bills. You pay for school, I'll pay for transportation. Because if you don't talk about it at that granular level, how do you avoid having those pitfalls, stumbling blocks that, like you said, trigger kind of adversarial conversations because you haven't discussed it?
Right. I feel that it comes down to a matter of trust. The bottom line is because if you're talking about joining with 2 people become one in the true sense of the word, spiritual, legalistic, you're really trusting this other person because what they do once you're married can really affect your life. I've heard horror stories. But I think in terms, it's just so important to lay that out to say who's going to be doing what and who has the skills to do what. The default over years has been like, oh, well, you're the man. Not necessarily. I know so many families, the woman runs the money because that's her skill set. You do what your best skill set is, and it has to be open, to each party. This is what we're doing with them. So there's no secrets. I've seen families where one person's running the money and the other person has no clue what's going on. Unfortunately, something happens. Either they dissolve the marriage or someone passes away, and the person who's left has no clue what's going on. They have nothing about the finances, who pays what, So whoever has that skill set to sit down and really go through it and say, okay, this is the way we're going to do things. We got this pot of money after taxes, and this is how we're going to divvy it up, and this is how we're going to make this marriage and this life successful. I mean, I think those are the most successful marriages or most successful relationships. And having said that, who does that? I mean, I think I shared with you early on, personal experience. I just shared with you, I got married and I was expecting a tax refund and it got snatched by the IRS. Had no clue the person that I married had an outstanding tax debt. And that was my introduction to, oh, wow, we got a problem here, and it was one heck of a shock, so.
Well, and I know that particularly older couples, people who have been married before and are now on their second marriage or their second serious commitment. I mean, they may not decide to get married, but they may do something, an alternative to that, right?
Right.
And there's property. People own homes. People own businesses. People have assets. That's a conversation that is going to prompt me to ask you a question. I have asked people that I know they're not multimillionaires, but they own a couple of pieces of property and have some investments. And I've said to them, you say you're getting married. Are you thinking about prenup? People recoil again because somehow a prenup to them means I don't trust you.
Right.
What are your thoughts around prenup, postnups?
I mean, that's a really great question once again. And the reason I say it's a great question because when you've been through the ringer, when I say the ringer, you've been married before, or if you worked your entire life to build up some assets and things of that nature, your first thought is, I want to keep this, but that's what I just said. I want to keep this. And this is why knowing who you're getting deeply into a relationship with, you have a great idea of who you're marrying. And, and it goes down to a series of trusts. Prenups, I look at it both ways. I understand it both ways in that, something, I've been working for 40 years. I'm not going to marry somebody and they're going to take half of this if it's not working out. So, I mean, I do get that, from both sides, but at the same extent, I'm like, if I'm marrying somebody and I'm truly in love with this particular person, I believe I'm going to leave them something. They're entitled to half of it, what have you. So I've seen people talk about it two different ways, but in this current world that we currently have where it's harder and harder, to accumulate things that you've worked years from, you don't want to put that to risk, and especially if it's not balanced. If one person is bringing, I guess 80% of the assets to the table, and another person is bringing 20%, it's not, you don't feel like it's even, if you will.
Right.
And it creates a lot of contention. I mean, I've seen people call weddings off, because they wouldn't sign a prenup.
Well, it's interesting that you would say that because I know people where they got married. There wasn't a prenup. They got married, and one of the parties had all of the tangible assets, all the fixed assets, as you would say in finance,
Sure.
right?
Right.
They owned the house, they owned the beach property, they had, vacation spot somewhere in Europe or whatever. They get married. There's no prenup, and throughout the course of the marriage, their view is that the assets are mine. Now, the assets started off as yours.
Correct.
Admittedly. But if you're getting married and you're both, let's say, 20, and you just bought this house and you just got that vacation property and you've only been paying the mortgage on it for 2 or 3 years, and I joined the team, at some point, our investments are going to be almost equal. Maybe,
Right.
right? Well, even if I marry you and the mortgage payment's coming out of your check
Hmm.
because I'm paying all the utilities, I'm assuming, and I'm paying for the groceries and I'm paying for the kids to go to school. So to me, whether you're writing the check for this and I'm writing the check for that, together we're making this whole thing fly.
I agree.
But everybody doesn't. And that's the and so when you don't and you've been married already, now you got one of those situations that you spoke about earlier where it's a bone of contention, and
Correct.
now the conversation, rather than being a casual one, is a contentious one.
Yeah. Once you have assets, I think the conversation, you're starting out early, it's a whole different conversation, but once you've established yourself and you've been working your whole life, and the way I think of it is this, with prenups, I just had an epiphany. I'm like, if we're married and we're saying this thing is for life, when I die, you're getting my assets pretty much anyway through my will. So what is the contention with actually having a prenup? If I feel that I'm going to make sure you're taken care of, there's other ways of taking care of a person. I mean, I've seen prenups where, it becomes almost a business contract. If you're with me for this number of years, you get this much money, whatever. And I'm like, this is just getting crazy. I mean, where's the trust and the love? And I understand people change. I mean, I've seen, and we've all been through it. You're in a relationship with somebody and you wake up one day and you're like, who the heck is this person? The way they think, I mean, me personally, I think very differently from when I was younger, or even when I got married and divorced, and the way I am now. And it's so funny we're having this conversation. I'm like, really, what would I do in that situation? Like, how would I really react knowing what I know now? And I would probably, quite honestly, probably have some type of prenup. If I'm being totally blunt with you, I'm like, I've worked really, really hard to accumulate this stuff. And at the same extent, but it wouldn't be just for me. If she had assets, she would have, some type of document to protect, her assets as well. But it would also be underneath the understanding that, hey, if something happens to me prematurely because I love you, you're going to be taken care of. And let me show you, this is not just words. Let me show you another document that if I die, whatever, you're getting this house or you're getting a piece of this. So, you don't feel that you're going to be financially disadvantaged. As you said before, she or he could be contributing in a whole different way.
Right.
And most people don't look at it that way. I'm paying the bill, so this is my house. And when people start talking like that, when people start talking about and once again, listen to what people are saying because they will tell you who they are.
That's true.
And ask them to clarify because sometimes they're just talking, but like, what do you mean by my? But once again, look at how people react. I mean, it's the little things sometimes. I mean, we're all grown now, and it's so funny. I was talking to some coworkers, and it's something as small as I asked them, "Hey, when you go out to dinner with your dates, do you reach?" And they're like, "Reach? What do you mean?" I'm like, "Reach for your pocketbook or your wallet to pay the bill." And they're like, "Oh no!" Like, what do you mean? You make the same money as this other guy, whatever. And their responses were incredible. Like, that's a man's role. I'm like, really? I said, you don't even make the attempt to do it, whatever. And it was just very telling to me that they were willing to spend, and what do the young kids call it? The bag. Somebody's got to have a bag now, or spend money on me, or this and that. And I'm just like, where did this mentality come from?
Well,
And I even teach my kids.
even if that's the case, isn't that something you want to know for sure? And I'm not saying that when you sit down to talk about it, you have the answers.
Right.
But if you don't have the conversation, you don't have a clue how they're thinking.
And it's interesting that I think in some cases when you start that conversation, the person will actually probably have to get back to you because think about it. We're talking about joining our incomes and our, coming up with a plan together. Most individuals don't even have a plan for themselves. It's interesting how many people don't even think about their own personal budget. Like how much money comes in, how much money goes out. What do I have at the end of the day? How much money am I putting for emergencies, whatever? Most people are just winging it. I mean, I hear statistics in the United States that, what is something like 75% of people don't have $5,000 in the bank? That is frightening. but they got a new Lexus. Once again, it's deeply psychological. It's like people want the appearance. And I'm like, as you get older, hopefully as we all get older, you don't care about the appearance anymore. You're like, I need some stability. But that conversation, Lynn, I think it's one that needs to happen. And based on that, how that person responds once you introduce it will tell you a lot about the person. Because if they're very guarded,
I don't know if this is somebody I want to team up with.
True.
But you know what? Here's the problem, though, Leroy. If you don't have it before the team is built and solidified, it's having it after the fact, while it still needs to happen then, is a whole horse of a different color. Because now, if you and I are not on the same page, then what?
And it causes all kinds of issues. That conversation is what you just said, because that person's perception of what's expected of the other person creates contention. And you're not even talking about that. And after a while, it's a pressure cooker, and it's going to blow sooner or later. It has to. You're going to feel like you're being disrespected. You're not being, listened to, what have you, So I find when you have those conversations early on, I often think of the couples that do have that conversation. I think I shared with you a little earlier. I had a good friend of mine. Him and his wife got married. They had a little conversation, and they said, listen, let's try something. Let's bank your entire salary for about 4 or 5 years, and we're just going to live off mine. So when it's time to buy a house, boom, we're done. And he's the only person I ever know that really actually did it. A lot of couples talk about it. They're actually sacrificed. Nobody wants to sacrifice. He actually sacrificed, and they're doing so well. And people are asking them, how'd you do it? It's like, we sacrificed early on. We still had fun and went out and things of that nature, but we lived within our means on one income. And we had months, of course, we dipped into hers a little bit, but I'm so impressed with that because I often think of, had that been my story, and it's not about material things, but how much more easier it would be right now, in terms of what people.
Certain bridges you don't have to worry about.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me use that example that you just gave. Let me twist it a little bit.
Okay.
Let's say that we're banking one person's salary, and the other person's paying everything from their salary, and the goal is to do this for 10 years. Okay. So you get to year 8. Some other things have happened in the union. You decide you can't stay together. Who gets what?
Yeah. And something, why I was saying that, I was thinking about that. The money actually went into a joint investment account with both of their names on it.
Ah, okay.
That's how I solved it. And I asked them that question. I'm like, well, was it in her name or his name? She's like, no. Because the way they looked at it, and this is once again very unusual, he said, this is our money. Once again, the language that he used, not mine or hers. This isn't like her paycheck. This is our money. So when I'm paying the mortgage, I'm not paying the mortgage. We're really paying the mortgage together, but she's sacrificing her salary and going to account. So I look at the way they thought. They looked at everything as ours. This is a team, and we're going to do this together. And the only way this is going to work if we isn't going to work if we let outside influences. So don't let your girlfriends in your head. Don't let my guy friends in my head. Hey, let's do this, whatever. It's me, you, and God against the world. And I mean, I just thought this was the most rare thing I have ever heard in my entire life. And it worked for them.
I'm going to share something with you. My parents were married for 35 years before they got a divorce, which is kind of odd.
Mm-hmm.
But the one area they never had any problems in was the financial area, because they sat down and they figured out what their lifetime game plan was.
Right.
What they were going to do in the way of, buying property. My father was in the military, so we traveled. He bought a house wherever we lived. When we moved, he used that as income property. That was just their strategy. And so when they got a divorce, it's still tough because you had a plan, and now the plan is, I started to use the German term kaput, but it's over. And so you've got to figure out, okay, which property do you get? Which does she get? Which property do you sell? Do you liquidate everything? How are you going to handle this? And But that's a much easier conversation to have if 30 years ago you all got on the same page financially,
Correct.
and you were looking at things that way. I'm always terrified when I talk to couples, younger couples who don't have a plan, don't have a philosophy, not only not a philosophy about money, because again, I don't think the conversation we're having is one about numbers. It's not about the numbers. It's about how much do I trust you,
Yep.
and how transparent do I feel I need to be if I'm going to be a part of this partnership.
You literally just summed it up. It's a matter of trust. And my thing is this: if you don't trust somebody, how are you in a relationship with them? How are you marrying this person? I mean, once again, I think people are attracted to the visual, of what they want a relationship to be. They're in love with the idea of being in love, and it's a hard pill to swallow when you see somebody and y'all have a lot of fun together and you're really attracted to them and they make you laugh and everything. But I call them deal breakers. There's this one thing that you think is going to get better, that you're going to be able to change, or you're going to be able to deal with, and it's just going to become contentious and it's going to get worse. And it's all based on trust. That's just the bottom line. How much do I trust you? I think we've all been burned, and I think it's the thing of transparency. So, I know couples that they have a rule: if you're going to spend over a certain dollar amount, just let me know and check in with me. It's not like I have to approve it, whatever, because we both, do well. But, just so we know what's going on, and let's talk about it, So there's not a point of contention. Or I can say, something, you get ready to buy these red bottom shoes and, kids' tuition is due next month, and it's going to be kind of tight. Do you really need those shoes?
Well, one of the interesting things with my father traveling, I spent half of my life overseas. Mm-hmm. And so when he would be gone, he's not there. He's gone. He's overseas. He's getting in line for us to get quarters, right? And so for a year, we're back in the States waiting for quarters to become available. My mother's running the household show. So she's not checking with him. And
correct.
He's got to trust that they know each other's, that they've agreed on the deal.
Right.
And that everybody's going to honor it, whether I'm there or not. And that's tough.
And making sure the people the person has the skill set. I'll share with you something personally. My family, my father worked a lot, to provide for the family. And he left certain dollars for my mother to take care of certain things, assuming she had the skill set to do various things, And it was great until he told me this famous story that one day, somebody came to get the house because she had got a mortgage payment or something to that effect, whatever. And he was just like really upset. I'm like, why were you upset? He's like, well, I thought she was taking care of everything. I'm like, but did you run her through, the methodology of what it needed to be done? He's like, well, I thought she could just figure it out. I'm like, Dad, come on, man. And he thought about it. He's like, you're right. I'm like, yeah, you're expecting somebody to do something you had a skill set to do, but it's, you got to see who, and if you don't know, then find out together. Once again, there's so many different resources out there, whatever. And just look, I look at people to say, oh, I'm not financially inclined. I'm like, guys, it's real simple. I got X coming in, I got X coming out, and there's an amount left over after all that. Right. It's literally that simple. And you do it in your head, but some people, they don't want to do the math. Everybody has to. We do math every day, but some people don't want to know the reality of it. That's why people get into credit card debt, and that's a whole nother thing. We talk about, relationships, what do they call it? Financial infidelity. People have things that the other people just don't know about. And that is just it's so dangerous and it's so misleading. When I hear about stuff like that, people are like, I didn't know my spouse had $50,000 in credit card debt, or I didn't know they had this secret account here. But you said something very profound, which is probably the theme of this entire conversation. It's trust. There's a reason that person didn't tell you. There's a reason a person is hiding this on the side. And that goes to the bottom line of the relationship. Because if I trust you and I love you, that means unilaterally. We're coming together and we're coming together as one. That means you are me. So when I'm not around, as you just said, when your dad wasn't around, your mother had to act as him. and say, you know something, I'm doing this for both of us and I'm going to make this happen. Right. That's, once again, rare. Very rare.
So let me ask you, you get married, you're not on the same page. You haven't had the conversation. You move along and something happens. And something happens, usually it's an unpleasant something happens. It's not like you found $100,000 in somebody's account you didn't know was there, right? It's usually you don't have enough money to cover this. Nobody planned for that. I know what you do in corporate America when things are out of kilter, but in a marriage, how do you get things back on track? And that's true even if it's not about money. What I'm talking to you about is when things get off kilter and you need a reset.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. You have to look at not just what happened, how you're responding to this, and come up with a plan. And what I mean the plan is this, and this is a difficult conversation. If one person got you into this financial problem because they have a spending problem, okay, you got to stop it. You got to stop the bleeding. And sometimes that's tough. And in some cases, it might even end the marriage, But what I'm saying is you have to have a reset, because if you keep going down the same path, and I've seen so many couples don't want to have the conversation and they don't want to stand up to the other person, either male or female, and it just keeps getting worse and keeps getting worse, and animosity keeps building. And it's not until they say enough is enough, somebody's got to be the adult in the room and actually stop it and say, this is what we have. This is the means we have to live beyond. And if we don't, this is not going to work, because it's not going to work anyway. Sooner or later, the bill's got to be paid.
Right.
So I think, I've seen it work, and I've seen the other person be stubborn and say, I'm not going to change. I've seen it happen both ways. But I think when you give it to the other person and say, hey, I often say this, if I make my partner part of the solution, you can't be a problem later on, because you have a vested interest in the solution. So we sit down and we come up with this solution together. You're part of the solution. You can't later on say, oh, well, you came up with this. No. We came up with this plan together. And then you have these check-ins to see how we're doing. How do you think, and just asking the person's opinion, how do you think we're doing? And you'd be surprised what the responses are in some particular cases, because if you don't have the foundation, if your family didn't grow up that way, person has no idea. Oh, we're fine. We both drive, Mercedes. We got a big house and this and that.
You're so right. It's interesting because actually coming up in a couple of weeks, we're having an episode on parenting.
Okay.
And there's no handbook for that. You can't go to school to learn how to be a parent. You just got to figure it out. And so much of what people bring to the party is fundamentally based on how they grew up, what they saw, because 9 times out of 10, what you're doing is parroting what you've already seen done. If you didn't see parents who were financially responsible, you're not going to have a clue how to have this conversation or even how to build a partnership. It's interesting. I'm in business for myself now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's very different than when I worked for an employer, at least at lower levels. You go to work and you do a task and you don't really have a lot to say about what's going on. You just kind of do what they ask you to do. As you grow in the organization and you get to more executive levels, you are responsible for making calls, serious calls that can impact hundreds or thousands of people. When you're in a relationship, I'm not talking about Charlie calls you up and he takes you out and you guys may even go on a trip or two and you have fun. That's one level of relationship. That's the employee version of the relationship. You're not responsible for anything. All you're responsible for doing is making sure everybody has a good time.
Correct.
That's very different than when you make a commitment to someone. We're going to be together, because being together, what does that mean? And I think that's what we're talking about when it comes to the money. You said it earlier. You said when you come together, you become one entity, right? I don't know that everybody gets that. They think of it as, I like you, you like me, we're going to do this thing together, sort of. We're going to be together on these things. Like, you're going to go with me when I have events to go to, and we're going to live in the same house, and then the rest of it, we'll kind of figure it out.
Right.
Except it never gets discussed. And I don't even know what you're good at. So I don't know what tasks to give you. I'll give you a case in point, and then I'm going to let you share with me your perspective. My ex, we're both in college, so we're smart, right? Or at least we think we are. We're smart, but we're young. We're like 22 years old. Stupid. Don't know a thing. Don't even know how to be me yet. But I'm going to get married. So we join, and we start learning. And he's a financial guy too. So when it came to money, he knew the numbers. He knew how to work numbers. That part was easy. But my dad, who had been an engineer, was Mr. Fix-It. Nothing in our house was ever broken. Now, I am sure that things wore out in our house too. But he anticipated that, changed up the little washers in the faucets, and I mean to the detail. Engineers are like that. To the detail level, everything was done. He bought a house. The house we moved into, they strategically bought a house where the upstairs was unfinished because he was going to finish it. And they could get it for a lot less, and he could finish it for a lot cheaper than getting the contractors to do it, right? I thought that all guys knew how to do that. I didn't know anything else. I mean, I knew nothing in our house stayed broken. And it wasn't like she had to holler and scream at him. It was what he loved to do. So it got done. I get married, and he doesn't know how to do anything. He doesn't know how to fix the toilet. It's running. The faucet, it's running. We got a clogged drain. He can't help me. And I'm wondering to myself, well, what kind of guy is this? I thought they all knew how to do this. But you know what? In all fairness to him, we were not mature enough on the front end of the relationship to sit down and figure out, yeah, we like each other. We want to be boyfriend and girlfriend. That's a whole nother level than we're going to be husband and wife. And husband and wife got to be boyfriend and girlfriend and adults. Sure. And I think that a lot of times people want to enter into relationships with this fantasy about what I like you, and you make me feel good, and you look good, and you smell good, and we have fun, and I like the way you cook. Maybe that's the most substantive thing you have. But talk to me about how taking that approach financially can be disastrous.
Yeah, I love what you just said, because it made me think, what is everyone's idea of marriage? Like, what's your reference point? And the example you just gave, your reference point were your parents. So this is the role of the man. You're supposed to be Mr. Fix-It and do X, Y, and Z, what have you. And if you think about it, a lot of us come from, I don't want to call it broken homes, but not conventional type homes, whatever. So how many people even know what a real marriage is supposed to be? What the roles are supposed to be. And especially in this day and age, that actually reverse. Where do you learn these things from? You said something else that made me think too. Your kids, they look at you, what have you. I got 3 kids, and they all think about money differently. And I'm like, really? I'm like, what house did you guys grow up in? So it has to be some things they learn internally and some things they learn in the outside world, because they're like night and day, and they get into arguments over it because they're all grown now about various things. But I think, when people are starting out, once again, what's your idea of marriage? Just starting off and like, where do you see us? And I think you can start off with just like almost a fantasy, like, where do you see us, that whole 5-year plan thing, whatever, but also talking about it in terms of a marriage, where do you see us living? What do you see us doing? The number of people that don't even talk about kids. I've seen people get married and one person doesn't want to have children, another person does. And I'm like, y'all didn't have this conversation? Are you kidding me?
Before you decided to do this? Oh my
But,
goodness.
but once again, it comes down to some people don't want the kids because it's a financial thing. I mean, I can tell you, all my friends our age that don't have kids, they're like, oh, I'm going to Bali for the weekend because they can.
Right.
Those
Right.
of us who had kids are like, I gotta bust this tuition in behind this week. I can't go with you. It's a whole different lifestyle. They just don't understand. So I think it starts with the next generation. Like I try to explain certain things to my kids about relationships and money. Like I told you a little bit earlier with my daughter. I'm like, hey, when you go out with a guy, pick up the bill every once in a while. It's just a nice gesture. You don't have to do it all the time, what have you, but you don't know his situation is, what have you. But pay attention. He may be going through a rough time, whatever. If you're not going out as much, and you want to know, oh, he's not taking me out. He may not have it that way. So I'm trying to get her to ask these questions, so she can start building this trust without the person getting an attitude and thinking she's a gold digger and wants to go out all the time and things of that nature. Because every time you go out or you have fun, it doesn't have to be spending money all the time. And that's the other misconception. They equate spending money with how much I love you, and that's the biggest misconception currently out there, and once again, it goes to how do people feel about money and that initial conversation to how is this going to factor into our relationship. And once again, we all have scars. Some people have been through things that, and people interpret things differently. I mean, I know people that grew up really, really, impoverished, and they're like, this is not going to happen to me, and they save money, but then some of them save money to the point that they're misers. I mean, like they don't do anything, and I'm like to the point where they overkill it, so there's got to be a nice balance. And I think that's what a marriage is. It's a balance,
But it can't be, that can't even happen if there's no conversation happening.
And Lynn, I think that's the major thing with breakdown of relationships and marriages, whatever, just basic communication. With social media now and all the noise of the world and, television and all the other things that come out, we don't have conversations anymore. Just to sit down and say like, hey, let's just talk. Let's get to know each other. We're too blinded by, all the other things, the interruptions, whatever, really getting to know somebody, I mean, if you really want to get to know somebody, go someplace to a park, whatever, and just have a conversation. It'll show you or lack of conversation, and I don't care if the person's shy, they're still going to tell you something.
Well, it's interesting that you would say that because so often, even with phones that everyone carries around like glued to their hip, right?
Yeah.
They will text each other and not pick up the phone and call.
Crazy.
And there are things that to me, I can't get out of a text. I can get certain data, but other data I'm not going to hear the inflection in your voice when you talk about X. So I don't really know. I only know what the letters say to me, and that doesn't give me any of the sentiment. But I think people sometimes will shy away from communicating.
Why do you think that is? Do you think it's because they are insecure about something that's going on and they don't feel comfortable sharing because they're going to be judged?
I think it's
okay.
that. I do. I think people, we've been in an era for a while where it's all about microwave. We want everything done yesterday.
Yep.
And I get it. I'm probably one of the most impatient people you'll ever meet. But I recognize that that's delusional. That all things are not going to happen overnight. It takes time for the cake to bake, right? But I think because of that, and because you can Google something and get an answer, the level of effort that you have to employ increasingly becomes smaller and smaller.
Okay.
I mean, now you don't have to know how to do anything. You can go online and get AI to do it. And,
yep.
And But if you don't know what questions to ask or what instructions to give that artificial intelligence, it can't help you. And I think people are so, you said it earlier, you said people are interested in the optics. They want to look good. They want to look smart. They want to look informed. Whether they are or not is irrelevant to many of them. And I think that's why they don't talk, because my representative can hold me up better.
Yep.
If I don't ever have to show up for real.
Correct. The best relationships I've ever been in is a woman who allows me to be vulnerable. And that takes a amount of trust. I mean, it's like after a while, because you think of it this way, most inadequacies, meaning whether you're arrogant or things that the foundation is insecurity. Because most people who are arrogant, they know they're not the best thing unless the slice of bread. They know that. But like, you know something, I got to bring you down so I can appear, so I can appear bigger. So I'm trying to hide all my insecurities, but somebody that just allows you to be yourself, and I think as some of us, as we get older, then we just don't care anymore. We're like, I'm exhausted. This is who I am.
That's the beauty of getting older. I was having lunch with my daughter and one of my proteges, and they're like 20 years my junior. Now we're all adults. And then,
sure.
And then the protege brought her son, and he's a young adult, like 22.
Okay.
And we were talking with him. He and his girlfriend just broke up, and he was talking about how he was thinking about it and what he wanted to do at this stage of life. And I thought, this kid is mature because he got it. He got it. But I know that as you go through the stages in life, you can be an adult at 22 and you can be an adult at 60, and they look very different. They're not, right. It's not the same picture, and what you're focused on is not the same things, and your perspective of things is different. You go to work at a company, you know the questions to ask long before they make you the offer. You're asking what their financial solvency is. Most people, I tell people, when you're interviewing, don't look at it as just you're trying to sell yourself. You better be finding out where you're going and what they're about, because maybe you don't want to work there.
Correct.
I know you need the money, but maybe 20 weeks into the job and you're looking for another job is a waste of time. But people don't. Let me ask you a question instead of making a statement. Do you think people know who they are?
No. And it's so funny. You just read my mind. I think that's the issue coming into relationships. People are not comfortable with who they are. Most people don't like who they are. That's why people have to be constantly interacting with social media or have, their posse around them, or their girlfriends or their crew and things of that nature, because they don't want to be alone to digest, why do I do these type of things? I try to teach, my kids this stuff because they're like, how do you know this stuff? I'm like, because I learned the hard way. You stop and think about, why do I do certain things? Like what triggered me? Some stuff is unresolved issues from childhood, or unresolved adult issues where something that hurts you, whatever, or you've seen something happen, what have you. But why do I think this way about money? Like, for example, like me, I know, like me and my sisters, for example, we research something to death before we buy something. And I asked them, like, why do you think that way? And we thought about it because we've all been burned before, buyer's remorse, you know? So even with like relationships now, as I get older, I'm like, my antenna is way up here, it literally, and I try to be open. I'm not a know-it-all because everybody is different. And sometimes I find that women would do this to me. I'll do something that will remind them of an old boyfriend and they'll meet. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not him. And then I'll explain it to them. So I try not to do the same thing. So I said that to say, I try to ask open-ended questions and just shut up and just let them talk, because they will tell you, male or female, they will tell you either through their actions or their words, their thought process. But in the same extent, I'm looking at myself going, okay, am I part of the problem? maybe, the way I think may not necessarily be right for this particular person, because people are at different stages in their life,
That's true. But you're my friend, so obviously there are lots of qualities that you have that I admire. But one of the things about you and about most of the people that I choose to have in my friendship circle
right,
are people who are thoughtful and who don't just sail through life with blinders on. We've all had those moments in our life, hopefully when we were much younger,
right,
and we fell down and we got those busted knees and those scars to prove it. But the scars, not that you can avoid them all, nor should you. You need to fall down. You need
right.
to bust up your knee. You need to get a scar, because then you'll learn. You'll know, if I do this, this is what's going to happen.
Sure.
I don't know that people, Roy, I don't know that people do that about life in general. I think they do it about relationships. I don't want anybody that reminds me of my ex.
Right.
But that's focused on external. That is not an internal assessment. And I don't know how many people sit with themselves and really do a deep dive into who's Leroy.
I agree with you, Lynn. And I mean, this is a whole nother, podcast, of course, because I'm going to tell you, part of it is you look in the mirror, you're going to see things you don't like, and that's a hard pill to swallow. I mean, there are certain things that you just have to accept who you are. Okay. I'm not going to be 6'9". That's not going to happen. Okay. So I got to be satisfied with how God made me, but there's certain things that I can change about myself to better myself, what have you. But as you just said, you have to be conscious of that fact to begin to do some type of improvement or change. And I don't think most people, because we're so busy with life. Think of it. You wake up, you do this, you got to interact with that, You're so, especially in this information age, we are so busy. How much time do people really even have a quiet moment for themselves? And look around you. When you're walking the streets, it could be a plane, train, automobile. People are on their phones. Very few people are just having a basic conversation anymore. So I call it the noise of the world. It blinds you for identifying who you are. And I think what you said to me is just so, that's what I love about you, Lynn. It's so intelligent and so profound that you can't get into a relationship until you figure out who the heck you are and what you want out of life. I mean, that's, to me, you just summed up the biggest issue. Coming together with somebody else and building a plan, a marriage, or a partnership, whatever, it's doomed if you don't even know who you are. And I think that's how people say they're in a relationship, another person changed. I don't know if they changed so much as parts they were masking finally came out. As you said a little earlier, you met their representative. Now you're starting to see the real person, and you're like, holy crap.
What is this?
And it happens to us all. Because sooner or later, you can't keep that facade up forever. The representative has got to show you the real person.
Don't you think that the conversation about finance, this is going to probably stun some of our listeners. I think the conversation about finance is revealing on levels far beyond the money.
Oh, what that?
And how it's going to get spent and how it's going to be saved and how it's going to be reported. I think what you're going to learn when you have a conversation about funds, you're going to meet the person. You're not going to be dealing with their representative. When it comes to money, the real person usually shows up much sooner than a discussion about anything else. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think you're right. And I love that you said that. It's a quick giveaway because it shows you, exposes how you think, what your lifestyle is like, how you react to certain things, whatever, good or bad. I mean, it's not always somebody that is running out of money. I've seen people have windfalls and become a completely different person. Right. I've seen, and I'm not going to mention any name, people we've worked for.
Yes.
that I'm like, who is this person? I mean, you see him now, and I'm so happy, Lynn, that you are still the same kind, intelligent spirit that you are, and you have every reason to be arrogant. And I'll tell you to your face, because you are everything I say you are. But I think what I was saying is this: it takes somebody who's comfortable within themselves not to be that arrogant person. To be, this is who I am. These gifts that I have are a gift from God. They're not me, And I think once again, when you have that financial conversation, it'll tell you some stuff that you may not necessarily want to hear. Now, you better listen, because I think that's the thing. We dispel it. Lynn what she really meant. No, Lynn told you exactly what she wanted you to hear. You just didn't want to believe it.
But see, I think when it comes to money, people don't give you that leeway, because everybody's ears are perked up. And so not only am I telling you how I spend money, but I'm also telling you what I think of us. If it's my me, then do you really want to hook up with me? Because I'm really not thinking about you. I'm thinking about me. And I don't know if that's what you're hearing. Do you really believe that I'm ready for a relationship with you? I don't know.
And some people feel they go into the relationship. I hear so much now, especially on the internet, these little other things that come on. People are looking for relationships for somebody to take care of them. I mean, they're actually saying, I want to make sure I'm with somebody who can maintain my standard of living. And I'm like, what in the hell is that? I mean, and I know what they're talking about. They're talking about, once again, the material things, but I've never met someone who's married for money that's happy. Not one. And I know quite a few. They give you the appearances. They have all the nice things and the jewelry and the cars and the big house. But when you look behind the curtain, it's the most miserable existence you've ever wanted to see. And I'm like, is that really worth, the things that you've attained, is that worth your happiness or lack of?
I think some people would tell you yes. And you know what? I'm not here to judge them. If that's all you need, God bless you. I can't be in a relationship with you. But that doesn't mean that somebody else can't.
And I think they're fooling themselves. I don't think they're happy.
I don't think they are either. But sometimes, you said something earlier. You said some people grow up in they're more impoverished than others, right?
Mm-hmm.
They didn't get to see a solid nuclear family. They didn't, there weren't two parents. So it was mom trying to make it work, scraping things together, or dad, if he's the only one there. And he's got to now be trying to be mom and dad and work and nurture. It's a one-parent household is a struggle. I don't care which parent you got.
Right.
The point, though, is that when you've been poor, they say, I'm never going to be in that situation again. I get that. On an intellectual level, I understand the emotion around that. But how that manifests itself, you will know when you sit down and have a talk about money.
I totally agree. I totally agree with you.
I think money is like it's the truth serum. It's the one time whatever kind of representative you've been putting out there sits down and the real you comes out, because people will react to money in ways they won't react to anything else.
I agree. And money comes and money goes. Because, I've seen people on both ends of the spectrum. I've seen people do extremely well and lose it all, and the whole family crumbles, and didn't need to. Because, us as Black folks, we pretty much know what it is to struggle. So, some of us have made it, fall up. We know how to get back up again, whatever, And I've seen people on the other end start off with nothing and build empires, and that ruins them as well, because they just forget, the whole foundation of what we started to actually do, But I think you're right. That will bring out just money. As much as it hurts me to say, it's a truth serum.
It is. It is.
It really is a truth serum, whatever, and if you let it control you, and I'll get spiritual for you for a second. Because the way I believe is this way: we don't own jack. All the things that we have, they're a blessing from God. He can give it to you and take it away, whatever, So I'm like, I don't own any of this stuff. or if you're rich, whatever, I can get sick tomorrow. And what good is all the money that I have?
It's gone. You can't make
Yeah.
it.
But I like what you said. I mean, it's a truth serum. I think, it will really show you because, how a person thinks, what their whole ideology is, because it branches off into so many different things. You can't do very little things you can do without money,
Right.
and it's an important factor because, I mean, I can love you to death. We can really get along and we agree upon all points, whatever. But bottom line is we got to eat. We got to have a place to stay. So, and I've seen that too. Two people, kind spirits, whatever, but they're trying to live like people lived back in the day. We're going to live off the land. And I'm like, where are you doing this at? I mean, and so you have to have that conversation, we said it early in the program. You're going to have the conversation one way or another. You're either going to have it, in a sit down way, or you're going to have it in a very aggressive way. Like, what the hell are you doing? Da, 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 da. It's going to be aggressive. It's going to be confrontational. So you might as well sit down and have it and explain to the person, listen, when they say, I hear people say, I'm not trying to get in your business. Well, guess what? If I'm getting into a serious committed relationship with you, I'm trying to get in your business.
I'm trying to get into your business.
Yeah. And you should be trying to get into mine.
Exactly. I could talk with you for the next 2 weeks. And we could not cover all of this. And so I want to ask you to consider maybe coming back.
Oh, I'd love to.
And talking about this from other aspects and continue this dialogue. But I appreciate the fact that you would indulge me and show up for this and share your wisdom and insight with people who probably don't talk about this very often. One of the reasons for this podcast concept is that we don't presume to be experts about this topic. We're just sharing some life experiences. And hopefully I'm bringing people to you like Leroy, who has a perspective that I think is more than valuable, and everyone doesn't have access to him. So hopefully what you will do is take this episode as an inspiration and use it to have something to talk about with your people when this show is over. Thank you for listening in, and show up next week again for another topic and another opportunity to have more to talk about.